Hi there, my name's Stuart Walker, and over the years I've implemented lots of different expenses systems for lots of different companies. And one of the biggest questions that always comes up is how expensive is it going to be? Now admittedly this is a bit of a piece of string question because it depends on so many things. It depends on how many users you're going to have, what functions you want within the system, and of course who you're going to buy it from. But there are some general things we can look at that will give you a guide as to how expensive an expenses system will be for you in the future. Now I reckon it divides down into three different questions. The first question is, how expensive is it going to be to set up? The second one is, how expensive is it going to be on a monthly basis? And the third is, how expensive are the alternatives? So let's have a look at the first one of those now. Okay, so the first one of these is, how expensive is it to install? Now, back in the old days, all expenses systems used to be what they call on-premise installs. So essentially you would have a server in your building, you would install the software in that server, you'd be responsible for managing it, for security and everything that goes along with that. Now these types of systems are actually quite expensive to set up. First of all, you've got to buy the software itself, which is in itself expensive. Then you've got to pay for IT staff to install it. You'll probably have to pay for consultancy to configure it. And actually the upfront capital cost is really quite high. That's what makes these types of installations good for very large companies. The alternative is to go for a SaaS type solution, and these are much more popular nowadays. Now SaaS stands for software as a service, and essentially it's any type of software that's delivered through your browser. So you'll just connect to a remote location on the internet and use your expenses system somewhere else. It's all managed by the people that provide it. The servers are on their premises, not yours, and so you don't have to worry about security or anything like that. Generally speaking, there's very little cost for a SaaS system to be set up. You might decide you want to pay for some consultancy to make it look the way you want it to look. You might pay for some training, but generally speaking, the upfront cost is very little. So the second question is, how much does it cost on a monthly basis? Now, for an on-premise solution, generally speaking, this is quite low. You'll have paid for the software up front, and every year you'll probably need to pay for an annual license. But on a per user or a per seat basis, it's actually quite cheap. You will, of course, need to have some IT staff to manage the system because it's on your servers, remember. But actually, the cost should be fairly low. One of the tricky things that some software companies do is they'll only sell licenses in blocks. So for instance, they might sell them in blocks of 10. If you've got 10 people, you'll buy one block. If you've got 11 people, you need to buy 2 blocks. So you have to pay for 20 licenses for 11 people, which makes it a little bit inefficient. SaaS systems charge, generally speaking, on a per user basis per month. So if you've got a user for any particular month, you pay for that month. Now the model's slightly different in as much as with the install systems, generally speaking, what will happen is you'll pay your license and you'll get access to the whole system. With SaaS systems, what they do is they will gradate the licenses. So what that means is if you just purely want a core system, maybe you just want something that users can input their expenses into and managers can authorize from, well, that'll be the core system, and that'll be a very cheap license to buy. If you want to add things to it, so if you want reporting, you want automated workflow, then the license cost will get more expensive. The good thing is that generally they're not charged in blocks, they're charged per user. But you do need to remember that if you add on extra functions, then you will pay the higher license fee for every single user, whether they use those functions or not. So SaaS systems are very, very good for very small companies. If you've only got 2 or 3 people that are going to be claiming expenses, then actually the monthly cost is going to be pounds. The third question then, and this is the most important question for me, is how expensive is what you're doing now? Very often people will be using clunky automated systems or even manual systems, and there are hidden costs to that. So if you think of somebody using a manual paper-based system, it takes time to print the forms out, it takes time for people to actually fill things in with their pens, it takes time to add things up, and it takes time for people to check the adding up and taking away. All that as an opportunity cost because frankly with the time they're spending on those, they could be doing something much more value add. So have a look at what you're doing now and just think about the hours that people spend, not just within the finance department, but also out in the wider business. because I think what you'll find is that actually doing things manually or doing things with a system that just doesn't work is the most expensive of all our three options. So in conclusion then, how expensive is an expensive system? Well, like I said earlier, this is a piece of string question. But I've got a feeling that if you're in a company that's using a manual system, or you've got an old, clunky, antiquated system, then any modern solution you put in is probably going to save you money. Remember though that an on-premise installed solution is going to take much more IT time, it's going to be more expenses up front, so the capital cost is going to be much higher, and a SaaS solution doesn't generally have a big upfront capital cost. For the on-premise solution, generally speaking, the licenses are probably lower per seat, but with a SaaS solution you only buy the licenses you need and you only buy the functions you need. So it really is up to you, I guess, what you want to choose. My name's Stuart Walker. I hope you found the video of use, and I look forward to seeing you in the not too distant future.